Hello, viewers. Welcome back. Today, we are going to take you through one of the most dramatic and consequential geopolitical events of early 2026, an event that has captured headlines around the world, escalated tensions between great powers, raised profound questions about international law and sanctions enforcement, and underscored how energy, military power, and diplomacy intersect in the 21st century. We're talking about the dramatic heist, seize pursuit and eventual seizure of a Russian flagged oil tanker by United States forces after it evaded a maritime blockade near Venezuela. A moment that some analysts are calling unprecedented in recent memory, and that has already shifted diplomatic calculations from Washington to Moscow and beyond. The story begins not in a battlefield, but on the open ocean, stretching thousands of miles from the Caribbean Sea to the North Atlantic, and it involves a vessel whose identity and ownership changed as quickly as the geopolitical winds around it. Reuters Plus One in early January 2026, U.S. military and Coast Guard forces successfully boarded and seized a large oil tanker known as the Maritime, which had been aggressively pursued across the Atlantic Ocean. What made this operation so extraordinary was the fact that the tanker was flying the Russian flag, and it had been the subject of an extended chase that stretched more than 2 weeks as U.S. forces attempted to stop it from evading sanctions enforcement. The United States described the seizure as part of an effort to enforce its sanctions on Venezuelan and related oil exports that Washington views as illicit, while Russia condemned the action as illegal, warning that it could heighten tensions at sea and potentially lead to broader conflict. Reuters Plus One, the vessel at the center of this story, had not always been known as the Maritime. Previously, it was called Bella One, and it had been on U.S. sanctions lists for carrying oil linked to Venezuela and Iran oil that the U.S. government contends fuels destabilizing activities and helps sustain regimes and networks opposed to American interests. When U.S. forces initially attempted to board the tanker off the coast of Venezuela during the previous month, the crew refused to comply, and the ship slipped past the U.S. blockade. As the pursuit continued, the vessel's crew repainted its name on the hull and flew a Russian flag, a move that added a new layer of complexity to the situation, and one that brought direct diplomatic conflict with Moscow. The decision by the tanker's operators to adopt a Russian identity was more than symbolic. Under long-standing principles of maritime law, a vessel is generally subject to the jurisdiction and protection of the state whose flag it flies, and this convention plays a central role in how nations regulate shipping, enforce laws, and conduct themselves on the high seas. Russia's involvement in this case immediately transformed what might have been a routine sanctions enforcement action into a flashpoint in U.S. Russia relations, and one that was being watched closely by other global powers, including China and European allies. The Guardian to understand why the United States was so determined to intercept and seize this tanker, we need to consider the broader strategic context. For years, the U.S. government has imposed sweeping economic sanctions on Venezuelan oil exports, targeting the regime of Nicolas Maduro and the networks that Washington says enable corruption, illicit finance, and alliances with hostile actors. In late 2025, the Trump administration escalated these measures by ordering what it called a complete and total blockade of certain oil tankers trying to load or unload Venezuelan crude, including those on sanctions lists. This policy was intended to cut off revenue streams that were seen as vital to the Maduro government's survival and to weaken its ability to resist U.S. pressure. Wikipedia, the tanker chased and seized in early January, was widely believed to be part of what analysts call the shadow fleet, a network of oil vessels that operate under ambiguous ownership, turned off tracking systems, false flags, or frequent reflagging in order to evade detection and sanctions enforcement. These ships have played a key role in moving crude oil for nations under sanction, including Venezuela, Iran, and Russia, allowing them to continue exporting their oil despite attempts by the United States and its allies to block such trade. In recent years, some of these ships have been re-registered under the Russian flag, a tactic that appears designed to leverage diplomatic protection and complicate efforts to intercept them. The Guardian, the dynamics of the shadow fleet, reflect a larger trend in global commerce and sanction evasion strategies. When conventional tools of trade and regulation are restricted, actors who wish to circumvent those tools adopt ever more inventive and often opaque means to continue doing business. But for the United States, which maintains that sanctions on Venezuela and allied entities are lawful and necessary, allowing such evasion unchecked would undermine the entire framework of economic pressure it has built with partners around the world. That is why U.S. authorities pursued the tanker so aggressively, even as it fled across international waters. Reuters at the heart of the U.S. legal justification for the seizure was a federal court warrant issued in the United States, authorizing law enforcement to take control of the ship. U.S. European Command issued statements confirming that forces boarded the vessel pursuant to this warrant, which was based on allegations that the tanker had violated U.S. sanctions and was part of a broader network transporting prohibited oil shipments. While the vessel was reportedly not carrying oil when it was intercepted in the North Atlantic between Iceland and the United Kingdom, U.S. military and Coast Guard personnel acted with the determination that the ship itself had been complicit in illicit sanctions evasion and therefore eligible for seizure under U.S. law. Inquirer. The pursuit itself was an extraordinary example of maritime enforcement. U.S. naval forces, including destroyers and Coast Guard cutters, tracked the vessel across the ocean, coordinating reconnaissance and surveillance with Allied aircraft, including British assets that assisted in monitoring the tanker's movements. The chase extended over 2 weeks, illustrating not only the logistical challenges of such operations but also the U.S. government's commitment to enforcing its policies even far from American shores. Business Insider +1 when U.S. forces finally boarded the Marinera. They did so in waters outside any single nation's territorial jurisdiction, highlighting how enforcement of sanctions and maritime law can extend into international waters under certain legal authorities. The operation was executed with specialized Coast Guard and military teams, using helicopters and boarding teams to secure the ship with minimal reported incident, a testament to careful planning and coordination across multiple branches of the U.S. government. Al Jazeera, the Russian government's reaction to the seizure, was swift and stern. Moscow condemned the action as a violation of international law, with the Russian Foreign Ministry arguing that no state has the right to use force against vessels duly registered under the jurisdiction of another country on the high seas. Russian officials, including legislators and transportation authorities, went so far as to accuse the United States of piracy, framing the seizure as not just unlawful but provocative. These statements underscored the diplomatic risk inherent in intercepting a vessel flying a powerful nation's flag, particularly one with which the U.S. already has fraught relations. AP News +1 from the U.S. perspective, however, the reflagging of the vessel and its history as a sanctions violating ship complicated Russia's claims to exclusive jurisdiction. U.S. officials argued that the tanker's rapid adoption of a Russian flag and name change from Bella 1 to Marinera were tactical efforts to evade enforcement rather than legitimate reflagging under conventional maritime practices, and that international law allows for boarding when a vessel is engaging in unlawful activities such as sanctions evasion. This legal dispute over jurisdiction and the conditions under which a ship may be boarded remains a central point of contention between Washington and Moscow. The national, plus one beyond the immediate legal arguments, strategic considerations also shaped how both sides communicated about the event. In Washington, administration officials portrayed the seizure as part of a broader effort to cut off revenue streams for regimes and networks that threaten regional stability, including the government of Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela and allied forces. Secretary of Defense figures emphasized that the blockade on sanctioned and illicit Venezuelan oil remained in effect anywhere in the world, signaling that U.S. enforcement would not be limited to waters near Venezuela, but could extend wherever legally feasible. Forbes, meanwhile, Russian officials framed the incident as evidence of American overreach, attempting to use force far from its own shores in pursuit of strategic objectives that Moscow finds illegitimate. The rhetoric from both capitals illustrates how a single maritime enforcement action can become emblematic of larger geopolitical struggles in this case. Disputes over sanctioned regimes, freedom of navigation, jurisdictional authority, and the balance of power between major world actors. Financial Times, the reaction from other global players has also been noteworthy. China, for example, criticized the U.S. actions as violations of international law, particularly in the context of broader U.S. pressure on Venezuela, an important energy partner for Beijing. European allies have taken a more mixed stance, with some countries expressing support for enforcement of sanctions against illicit oil trading, while others voice concern about potential instability and the legal precedents such actions may set. Sky News: at the local level in Venezuela, the developments have compounded an already complex political crisis. While the victor government there has condemned U.S. actions as unlawful, others see the enforcement as part of the larger unraveling of Maduro's capacity to govern a collapse that has included his own capture by U.S. forces in a separate operation earlier in January 2026. Together, these events represent an extraordinary moment in Venezuelan history, with profound implications for its people and the country's oil industry. Al Jazeera energy markets themselves have reacted to the news, with traders noting that disruptions to sanctioned oil flows and the seizure of tankers could tighten supply, even as some analysts argue that the actual volume of crude involved may be limited. Regardless, the symbolism of disrupting a key channel of sanctioned oil transportation sends a powerful signal to markets and to the governments that rely on these energy exports. CBS News: within the United States, officials involved in the operation have emphasized that enforcement will continue and that similar actions may follow if vessels are found to be violating sanctions or evading maritime regulations. Some lawmakers have praised the administration's assertiveness, calling it a demonstration of U.S. resolve to uphold international norms and pressure hostile regimes, while others have expressed caution about the potential for unintended escalation, particularly with Russia. CBS News: there are also broader questions about how this event will influence future maritime enforcement and sanctions policy. Experts in international law and maritime security are debating whether the seizure sets a new precedent for how far nations can go in boarding and seizing foreign, flagged vessels, particularly when those vessels are accused of engaging in illicit activities. As global supply chains and shipping routes become more complex, the actions taken by the United States in this case will likely be studied for years to come. Financial Times: for the crew members aboard the Marinera, the immediate future is also uncertain. Russian officials have demanded humane treatment and the prompt return of Russian nationals, and the legal status of crew members may become entangled in broader diplomatic negotiations. How these human elements are resolved will contribute to the longer-term narrative of this incident, and may influence how other nations respond when their citizens are involved in similar situations on the high seas. Inquirer: calm as we move forward from this moment in history, it is clear that the seizure of the Marinera has reverberated far beyond the deck of a single tanker. It has exposed the complexities of modern sanctions enforcement, the interplay between maritime law and national policy objectives, and the delicate balance of power between major states with competing interests. It has also highlighted how the world's oceans, often seen as vast and unfettered, are deeply entwined with global politics, economics, and security. Reuters, we will continue to monitor and report on how this situation develops, including any further diplomatic fallout, legal challenges, and policy changes that arise from this unprecedented high seas showdown. Thank you for watching and staying informed. Your engagement with these issues matters in a world where global events can have local impacts in ways that are both immediate and enduring.